Good evening and welcome. Tonight we're going to be reading through this book about Ethiopia. Now, I have actually already flipped through this book before on my channel and looked at all the pictures, so tonight we're just going to read all of the little boxes. So we're going to skip this long intro and go right into the boxes. We're going to start off with Ethiopia's climactic zones, starting with the Alpine or Kur. Location, Ethiopia's highest elevations. The elevation is over 10,800 feet. The temperatures are below 50 degrees Fahrenheit, and features of interest: regular frost, snow on highest mountain peaks, unsuitable for agriculture. The cool zone or Dega. Location, chiefly northwestern or the Amhara Plateau. Elevation is 7,500 to 10,800 feet. Temperatures range between 34 and 61 degrees Fahrenheit. And features of interest: warmest months are March to May. Light frost is common at night in the higher elevations. The temperate zone or Wena Dega. Location, lower areas of Amhara and Somali plateaus. Elevation is between 4,900 and 7,500 feet, and temperatures range between 59 to 72 degrees Fahrenheit. Apparently there's no features of interest here. The hot zone or Kola. Location, eastern Ogaden, valleys of the Blue Nile and Taziki rivers. Areas along Kenyan, Sudanese, and South Sudanese borders. Elevation 1,600 to 4,900 feet. Temperatures, average daytime temperatures 81 degrees Fahrenheit, and features of interest: the river valleys receive more rainfall than the border areas. And the semi-desert or Bereha. Location is the Danakil Depression and other scattered low-lying regions of Ethiopia. Elevation is below 1,600 feet. Temperatures range from 86 to 120 degrees Fahrenheit. And features of interest is arid and unsuitable for agriculture. Kind of an interesting box there. Let's read about Addis Ababa. Modern Addis Ababa began to take shape in 1889 when the Ethiopian monarch Menelik II started building a palace near the ruins of the 16th century capital at Entoto. Menelik's Queen Tetu marveled at the flowering mimosa trees in the area, and thus the town was named Addis Ababa, meaning new flower. It officially became Ethiopia's capital in 1896. Other important dates for Addis Ababa include 1958, when the city became the first headquarters of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, and 1963, when it hosted the African Heads of State Conference, at which the OAU Charter was signed. Among the many points of interest in Addis Ababa, two in particular stand out. One is the George's Cathedral, also known as St. George's Cathedral, which was built in 1896 to commemorate Ethiopia's victory over the Italians at the Battle of Adwa. George's Cathedral features impressive stained glass created by Ethiopian artist Afewerk Tekle. Another urban wonder is the Mercato, one of Africa's largest open-air markets. Here, a dazzling array of goods is displayed for sale, including vegetables, spices, clothing, and jewelry. As it draws Ethiopians from far beyond the capital, the Mercato has been described as a melting pot for the country's different languages and cultures. Let's see what's next. Ooh, Lucy of long, long ago. In 1974, American paleoanthropologist Donald Johanson discovered some fossilized bones in the Awash Valley of Ethiopia. Remarkably, Johanson's team found 40% of an ancient skeleton, including a jaw, an arm bone, a thigh bone, ribs, and vertebrae. The fossils turned out to be the bones of a female hominin who had lived some 3.2 million years ago. And by the way, a hominin is a primate belonging to the zoological family Homininae, which includes modern humans, extinct human species, and all immediate ancestral species. That's us, humans. During the excavation, the scientists played the Beatles song Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds loudly on a tape recorder, and they named the specimen Lucy. She is now often called the grandmother of humanity. Lucy would become one of the most significant discoveries ever in the study of human evolution. She belonged to a new species called Australopithecus afarensis, a previously undiscovered link between modern humans and our pre-human ancestors. When she lived, she was a full-grown adult who stood 3 feet 7 inches and weighed 64 pounds. Although her brain was small like a chimpanzee's, she walked upright like a modern human. Upright bipedal walking was a crucial development in the evolution of early humans, which differentiated them from the ape species. For 6 years, from 2007 to 2013, an exhibition titled Lucy's Legacy, The Hidden Treasures of Ethiopia, toured the United States. It featured the actual Lucy fossil reconstruction and some 100 artifacts from prehistoric times to the present. When Lucy returned to Ethiopia in May 2013, the country celebrated. Ethiopians call the Lucy skeleton Dinkanesh, which means you are wonderful. In 2015, U.S. President Barack Obama met Lucy when he visited Ethiopia, and he was the first sitting American president to ever visit the nation. He said, "We honor Ethiopia as the birthplace of humankind. We are reminded that Ethiopians, Americans, all the people of the world are part of the same human family." That's so true, isn't it? Let's read about the very famous obelisk of Aksum. One of Aksum's ancient pillars came to be called the Obelisk of Aksum. 80 feet tall, that's 24 meters, that's so big. 80 feet tall, it toppled in the 16th century, probably during an earthquake, and lay in pieces on the ground for centuries. During Italy's invasion of Ethiopia, which was then called Abyssinia, in 1935 to 1936, the Italian army looted the massive ruins of the obelisk and sent them to Rome. There, the pillar was reassembled to commemorate the 15th anniversary of Benito Mussolini's fascist regime. In 1947, following World War II, Italy agreed to return the obelisk as part of a UN-brokered agreement. However, the pillar remained in Italy for another half-century. Finally, in 2003, Italy began dismantling the 1,700-year-old obelisk, and by 2008, after extraordinary difficulties and expense, it stood once again in its original home in Aksum, where a huge celebration welcomed its return. Today, the ruins of ancient Aksum are a UNESCO World Heritage Site and a tourist attraction. I would love to go see that, to be honest. That sounds so cool. Let's see what we have next. Human rights concerns. Not the happiest topic, is it? International observers and Ethiopians themselves have expressed concerns over the Ethiopian government's poor human rights record. According to the U.S. Department of State's Human Rights Report for 2004, the aftermath of the 2005 parliamentary elections closely demonstrated the patterns of violence, human rights abuse, and political repression that were entrenched in the governance of much of the country. Those same patterns of abuse and repression continued through 2015. This book's from 2015, by the way. Heavy-handed efforts to curb press freedoms and suppress political dissent continued to be two major areas of particular concern. In its 2016 World Report, Human Rights Watch stated, in Ethiopia in 2015, there were continuing government crackdowns on opposition political party members, journalists, and peaceful protesters, many of whom experienced harassment, arbitrary arrest, and politically motivated prosecutions. Government officials and security forces routinely enforce harsh penalties such as imprisonment, seizure of property, and sustained harassment to silence their political opponents and even ordinary citizens. Opposition parties and their supporters are regularly blocked from holding public protests. According to Human Rights Watch, in April and May 2015, protests erupted in towns throughout the region of Oromia against the planned expansion of Addis Ababa's municipal boundary into Oromia. Security personnel used excessive force, including live ammunition, against protesters in several cities. At least several dozen people were confirmed dead and hundreds were arrested. Many of them remain in custody without charge. Restrictions on human rights monitoring and on independent media make it difficult to ascertain the precise extent of casualties and arrests. Other forms of human rights abuses include a lack of press freedom and extensive government surveillance of social media. LGBT rights are non-existent. Same-sex relations are illegal and punishable by up to 15 years in prison. Let's see what's next. Hopefully it's a little happier and more YouTube-friendly. Oh yeah, definitely. The birthplace of coffee. Coffea arabica, or the coffee plant, still grows wild in the mountain forests of Ethiopia's southwest. In fact, Ethiopia is considered the birthplace of coffee. The word coffee itself might have come from the Kaffa region, where the plant has been grown for centuries. Legend has it that some 1,200 years ago, a goat herd from Kaffa in ancient Abyssinia, which is now Ethiopia, noticed his goats dancing and unable to sleep after eating some red berries. The herder then chewed some of the berries himself and felt a sense of heightened well-being. The mountain people took to chewing the berries for their stimulating effect, and eventually some people figured out how to roast, grind, and steep the beans to make a beverage. Traders eventually spread the kaffa beans throughout the Middle East and Europe. Coffee plays an important role in Ethiopian culture. It's also big business. With about 430,453 tons of coffee produced annually, it is the country's #1 export. In 2014, Ethiopia earned $780 million American dollars from coffee exports. The sector made up almost half of Ethiopia's gross domestic product, 84% of exports, and 80% of total employment. Ethiopia is the largest producer of coffee in Africa and the 5th largest producer in the world. Commonly exported Ethiopian coffees include the Sidamo, Yerga Chefe, and rare varieties. Water woes. In 2004, Lake Haramaya vanished. The lake in Oromia, Ethiopia, had once been almost 10 miles across and 25 feet deep. It wasn't a huge lake, but fishermen earned their livelihoods from it. Farmers used its water for irrigation, and the people in the surrounding region used it for their water supply. Now the lake bed is completely dry, and the water is unlikely to ever return. The reasons for the lake's demise point to the usual suspects: drought, lack of government oversight, population increase and excessive use, wasteful farming practices, and climate change. Water is a huge problem for Ethiopia. Clean water is necessary to sustain life, as well as for sanitation. In Ethiopia, access to clean drinking water and sanitation facilities is among the lowest in the world. A study conducted by water.org found that only 42% of the population has access to a clean water supply, and only 11% of that number has access to adequate sanitation services. The CIA World Factbook, meanwhile, reports close to the same figures for 2015, with a somewhat better percentage, 28% of the total population, for access to adequate sanitation facilities. In this country, women and children walk up to 6 hours to collect water, and often that water is from rivers or ponds shared by animals. In other words, the water is often contaminated. Waterborne illnesses such as cholera or diarrhea are the leading cause of death in children under 5 years old in Ethiopia. Some 33,000 children die every year from dirty water and poor sanitation. With inadequate water, people cannot bathe or even wash their hands often enough, which greatly increases the threat of disease. Extended droughts have created famines and led to conflicts with neighboring countries. This is a little happier. Ethiopia's key national parks. The Simien Mountains National Park, home of the Rosh Deshan Peak, the 4th highest mountain in Africa. The Simien Mountain National Park is listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It was added to the list in 1973, shortly after it was created in 1969. In 1996, the park was unfortunately added to the list of World Heritage in Danger, and it remains there to this day. The park was originally established primarily to protect the Walia ibex that lived in the Simien Mountains. The Walia ibex, or Kaprawali, is a goat found nowhere else in the world. By 1994 to 1996, the ibex population had fallen to about 200 or 250, mainly due to habitat loss and hunting. However, by 2004, the number had risen to about 500, but is still critically endangered. Also found in the park are families of the unique gelada baboon, with its scarlet bleeding heart on its chest, and the rare simian fox or Ethiopian wolf. The simian fox, although named after the mountains, is rarely seen here. In 2010, the population estimate here was 102, and is more likely to be seen in the Bale National Park. Over 50 species of birds have been sighted in the Simien Mountains. Awash National Park. Lying in the lowlands to the east of Addis Ababa, the Awash National Park is one of the finest reserves in Ethiopia. Awash National Park, surrounding the dormant volcano of Fantale, is a reserve of arid and semi-arid woodland and savanna, with forests along the Awash River. 46 species of animals have been identified here, including Besa oryx and Swain's hartebeest. The bird life is prolific, especially along the river and on the nearby Lake Basaka, and there are endemic ones among the 392 species recorded. Omo National Park. One of the most beautiful national parks in Ethiopia, the Omo National Park is home to an amazing range of wildlife. About 306 species of birds have been identified here, while large herds of eland, some buffalo, elephants, giraffes, cheetahs, lions, leopards, and Burchell zebras are not uncommon. Mago National Park. Covering an area of 1,343 miles on the banks of the Omo River, the Mago National Park is relatively undeveloped for tourists. The broad grasslands teem with herds of buffalo, giraffes, elephants, and kudu, while sometimes it is possible to find lions, leopards, and Burchell's zebras. The abundant bird life here is typical of dry grasslands and riverbanks. Gambala National Park. Many interesting species of animals and birds can often be seen here. According to the Wildlife Information Office, there are hundreds of species of birds, 596 residents, and 224 regular seasonal migrants residing in the park. And Bale Mountains National Park. The Bale Mountains include Ethiopia's second highest mountain, but are not as rugged as the simians. The region is home to several of Ethiopia's endemic animals, including the simian fox and mountain nyala. Like the Walia ibex, the simian fox, or Ethiopian wolf, is an endangered species. More than half of the existing population lives in the Bale Mountains, numbering around 210 animals. Some of the wolves in the region have hybridized with domestic dogs. Who owns the Nile? Good question. The Nile River, Africa's longest river, is most often associated with Egypt. However, its water resources are shared by 11 countries, including Ethiopia. The river's two main tributaries are the White Nile and the Blue Nile, which flow together in Sudan to form the Nile itself. The Blue Nile rises from Lake Tana in the Ethiopian highlands. The Blue Nile provides most of the water to the main Nile. Egyptians rely heavily on the waters of the Nile and were therefore concerned when Ethiopia began to build a huge dam on the Blue Nile. Construction of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam began in 2011 with a 2017 opening date. When completed, which it is, it will be the largest hydroelectric dam in Africa and the 11th largest in the world. During the construction, Egypt launched vigorous objections. Egypt fears the dam will cause a permanent reduction in the waters of the Nile. Although Ethiopia reputes that claim, the eventual impact on the downstream water volume is essentially unknown. The project caused political conflict between the nations, as Egypt claimed the construction of the dam violates a 1959 treaty that gives Sudan and Egypt exclusive rights to the Nile's waters. So apparently who owns the Nile is Egypt and Sudan. And in Ethiopia's opinion, Ethiopia as well. Styles of dress and adornment. One of the most distinctive articles of clothing for rural Ethiopians is the shema, a one-piece cotton wrap worn over the shoulders and arms. Worn by both men and women, the shema is particularly common among the Amhara and Tigray peoples. This garment often features a colorful border and is sometimes worn for ceremonial occasions by city dwellers as well as country people. In the higher mountainous regions, the shama is useful in keeping out the cold wind. Another traditional costume is the kameez, a white cotton gown that women sometimes wear beneath the shama. Western-style dress is now a common sight in urban areas, although people may wear more traditional clothing at home. Earrings, bracelets, necklaces, and religious emblems are popular forms of adornment in Ethiopia and are often made of beads or shells. Oromo women are known for their attractive necklaces, while Tigray women are famous for their gold jewelry. Scarves and turbans are worn by women throughout the country. Men in rural areas often carry walking sticks, known in Ethiopia as doulas, as they roam the countryside. Naming conventions in Ethiopia. Ethiopians do not use family names or a surname or last name. Usually an Ethiopian person has an individual name followed by one or more patronymics. This is typically his or her father's first name, which may then be followed by the grandfather's first name. People in the West sometimes confuse this patronymic name as a surname, but it is not because the name changes with each new generation. Likewise, when an Ethiopian woman marries, she does not change her name to her husband's patronymic because it is not a family name. When using a title of respect, therefore, to address a man named Abebe Emmanuel, for example, it would be incorrect to call him Mr. Emmanuel, but rather he should be addressed Mr. Abebe. Ethiopians use the titles of Ato for Mr., Wezaro for Mrs., and Wezerit for Miss, followed by the person's first name. I think it's interesting how names can vary in different cultures. Let's see what we've got here. Pilgrimage to the tomb of Sheikh Hussein. Twice a year, thousands of Oromos converge at a site in the eastern foothills of the Bale Mountains to honor the 13th century Muslim saint Sheikh Hussein. The first pilgrimage occurs from February to March to commemorate Sheikh Hussein's death. The second occurs from August to September to celebrate the anniversary of the Prophet Muhammad's birth. Each lasts approximately 2 weeks. Of the approximately 50,000 Oromos who participate in each pilgrimage, some will make the journey only once in their lives. Others will return again and again. Sheikh Hussein was an Islamic missionary from the Red Sea coast who spread Islam in the Ethiopian interior in the 13th century and won many converts and even more admirers. To keep the memory of Sheikh Hussein alive, his followers built a shrine in his honor in a town that bears his name. Originally, only Muslims made the pilgrimage to Sheikh Hussein's tomb, but as the saint's teachings became more widely known over the centuries, other Oromos who had not yet converted to Islam began to join the pilgrimage. Those Oromos who undertake the pilgrimage today tend to blend Islam with traditional beliefs. Some of the pilgrims are devout Muslims, while others possess only a nominal faith. Pilgrims come from all over the country to participate in the sacred journey, some traveling from hundreds of miles away. Many people proceed to the shrine on foot. Others ride mules, donkeys, or horses. During the journey, which can sometimes take months to complete, pilgrims are not allowed to cut their hair or sleep indoors. They traditionally carry forked walking sticks known as Ule Sheikh Hussein as they make their way to the holy site. Once they arrive at the shrine, the pilgrims take turns entering Sheikh Hussein's tomb by crawling through a small doorway. I guess that's it right there. What follows is an experience filled with mysticism and spiritual power. While believers file inside the tomb, others remain outside to recite poetry, dance, and pray together. All of them hope that by visiting Sheikh Hussein's shrine, they will have both honored the memory of a great man and absorbed some of his ample goodness. Ethiopianism, Rastafari, and Haile Selassie. Certain references in the Bible refer to black people as Ethiopians. For Africans in the New World who had been forced from their homeland into slavery in the Americas and converted to Christianity, or raised as Christians in later generations, these passages held, and for many people today still hold, particular meaning. That was a very long sentence. They harken back to a time of great African empires and suggest that black peoples have a proud and deep cultural heritage that predates European civilization, which is true. A passage from Psalm 68:31 holds particular importance. It prophesies that princes shall come out of Egypt and Ethiopia. Princes shall come out of Egypt and Ethiopia, shall soon stretch out her hands unto God. Okay, I don't understand. For people who have been stripped of their heritage, this reference held a promise of liberation and salvation that came to be called Ethiopianism. This spiritual, cultural, and political ideology united African peoples in America and the Caribbean. The interpretation of these texts took various forms. In Jamaica, the Rastafari movement was born in the 1930s, following the coronation of Rastafari Makonnen as the Emperor of Ethiopia. He became Haile Selassie. Followers of the movement see Haile Selassie as a manifestation of God. More specifically, he is Jah, the Messiah, the second coming of Jesus Christ, and the fulfillment of the Psalm 68:31 prophecy. During his lifetime, Haile Selassie rejected his own deification, but the belief persists among many Rastafari. Others, however, see him now as an African prophet. Either way, he is revered and worshipped by the faithful, who also view Ethiopia as the promised land. Today, the Rastafari claim about 1 million adherents worldwide. The Rastafari culture is associated with reggae music, dreadlock hairstyles, and marijuana, but of course is far more complicated than that. Curiously, the movement never took hold in Ethiopia itself. There are, however, small communities of Jamaicans who have settled there, bringing their culture and religion with them. Let's see what we've got in this chapter. Writing systems. The indigenous Ethiopian language of Giz, Amharic, and Tigrinya are written using a unique set of characters derived from an ancient writing system of South Arabia that uses the Himyaritic alphabet. Ethiopian script contains 31 core characters that can be combined in various ways to form almost 200 more written characters. Since many characters in Ethiopia's writing system represent consonant-vowel combinations and thus form syllables, Ethiopian script is said to have a syllabary rather than an alphabet. The complexity of Ethiopia's writing system makes learning to read and write more difficult than it is in English. It also makes keyboard typing rather challenging. Other writing systems are also used in Ethiopia. Arabic script is found in Ethiopia and is used not only for Arabic writing, but occasionally for Hariri and Tigrinya as well. The Roman alphabet is used for writing English and other European languages. Its characters can also be used to write Ethiopian languages. In fact, Ethiopia's new government has encouraged the printing and publishing of written materials in the Roman alphabet rather than the traditional Ethiopian script. A setback to this move is the high costs involved in republishing books from traditional Ethiopian script to the Roman alphabet, especially for primary schools, where about 20 local languages are used as the medium of instruction. Ethiopia's printing houses are also too small and inadequately equipped to ensure the success of the government's plan to publish written materials in the Roman alphabet on a large scale. I think the script is so beautiful. Let's see what we have next. Writers out of Ethiopia. The Ethiopian diaspora has produced some extraordinary writers. Here are just a few of today's notable authors. Dina Mengetsu, born in Addis Ababa in 1978, is an Ethiopian-American novelist and writer. His family left Ethiopia during the revolution when he was only 2 years old. He grew up in Peoria, Illinois. His first novel, The Beautiful Things That Heaven Bears, came out in 2007 and tells the story of an Ethiopian immigrant in America. How to Read the Air, published in 2010, again follows the lives of young Ethiopian immigrants. It won the Ernest Gaines Award for Literary Excellence in 2012. Mengetsu's newest book, All Our Names, published in 2015, was named a Best Book of the Year by a number of important media, including the New York Times, the Washington Post, and National Public Radio. Abraham Fergessi's novel, Cutting for Stone, was released in 2009 to great acclaim in the United States and around the world. Born in Addis Ababa in 1955, Fergessi is the son of Indian parents, but he considers Ethiopia home. He grew up there and went on to begin his medical education there, but eventually moved to the United States. Today he is both a doctor and a writer. Cutting for Stone takes place in both Addis Ababa and New York City and has made many bestseller lists ever since. Fergessi, who is a professor of medicine at Stanford University Medical School, has also written several other well-received books. Maza Mengistu was also born in Addis Ababa in 1971 and lives now in New York. Her novel, Beneath the Lion's Gaze, published in the United States in 2010, has won many esteemed awards and accolades. It opens in Addis Ababa in 1974 on the eve of the revolution. It has been praised as a transcendent and powerful debut. Nega Mezlekia was born in Jijiga, Ethiopia, in 1958, but has lived in Canada since 1985. His past as an armed rebel in Ethiopia during the regime of Mengistu Haile Mariam makes him fear going home. His memoir, Notes from the Hyena's Belly, An Ethiopian Boyhood, was published in 2000 and has won numerous awards. Rebecca G. Haile, born in 1965, is an Ethiopian American who has lived in the United States since she was 11. That was when her family was forced into exile from their homeland following the 1974 revolution. Her book, Held at a Distance, My Rediscovery of Ethiopia, is a memoir about her return to her native country 25 years later. All those books sound so interesting. Using the body as a canvas. What happens when art, fashion, and tremendous creativity are combined? Among the Surma people, the answer is body painting. Based in the mountains of southwestern Ethiopia, the Surma are a semi-nomadic people who raise cattle and grow crops for a living. Surma men are known for conducting fierce stick fighting competitions, while the women are renowned for adorning themselves with lip plates. The Surma's rich tradition of body painting, however, may be their most fascinating custom of all. The Surma's prime body painting season comes after the October harvest, when people have sufficient leisure time to devote to their art. No one is left out. Men and women, young and old, are encouraged to paint and be painted. Before a person is painted, their body is covered with a mixture of chalk and water. Patterns are then created by someone who removes part of the chalky mixture with their fingertips. The only limit to the designs is in the painter's imagination. Patterns can be vertical, horizontal, diagonal, circular, or any combination thereof. Some patterns are designed to attract the opposite sex, while others might be used to scare away potential enemies. Paintings on the face can resemble a mask or a series of multicolored stars. Surma children have been known to paint one another as if they were twins. That's cute. The Surma are not the only Ethiopian people to use body painting as a form of adornment. The Karo of the lower Omo River region also paint one another. Sometimes they paint multicolored mask-like patterns on their faces, or patterns that imitate the spots of the guinea fowl. Really remarkable. Let's see what else. Olympic heroes, past and present. At the beginning of the 1960 Summer Games in Rome, Abebe Bikila was a little-known member of Haile Selassie's Imperial Guard. When the games were over, Abebe had become the greatest sports hero Ethiopia had ever known. His first-place finish in the marathon garnered world attention because he had to run the streets of Rome barefoot. Not only was he the first person from Black Africa to win an Olympic gold medal. Oh, it's a comma. Abebe would be the first to win the Olympic marathon twice. He won the 1964 Olympic marathon just 6 weeks after his appendix was removed. His time set world and Olympic records. I've had my appendix removed. That's incredible. The last thing you want to do is go running. That's so neat. Abebe's Olympic triumphs made him a hero to sports fans all over Africa. He inspired a whole generation of Ethiopian runners, and his name became synonymous with speed and stamina. He died in 1973 at the age of 41, 7 years after becoming paralyzed in a near-fatal auto accident. His funeral in Addis Ababa drew thousands of fans and admirers. A more recent Olympic hero is the long-distance runner Kenenisa Bekele, born in 1982. He's considered one of the greatest male distance runners of all time, an 11-time world cross-country champion, a 3-time Olympic gold medalist on the track, and the world record holder at 5,000 and 10,000 meters. Kenenisa, who is renowned for his ability to accelerate very quickly at the end of a long-distance race, holds many other records, titles, and medals as well. In the 2014 Paris Marathon, for example, he finished in a course record time of 2 hours, 5 minutes, 4 seconds. Wow. I was actually reading about him before. He had to run barefoot because his shoes didn't arrive in time for the race. That's terrible, but I mean, he still won, so amazing. Stick fighting competitions. Stick fighting is one of the most popular sports among the Surma people of southwest Ethiopia. Not only does it test the men's strength, coordination, and competitive zeal, it also serves as a forum through which successful contestants can meet potential wives. The 3-month-long stick fighting season begins just after the rainy season and pits men from different villages against one another. Duels take place in special clearings with plenty of room for spectators. The contestants, usually unmarried males between their mid-teens and early 30s, are given 6-foot-long wooden poles with which to do battle. Their goal is to knock down their opponents and remain in the game as long as possible without getting knocked down themselves. Although some competitors are wrapped in protective clothing, others battle in complete nudity to prove their courage. Well-placed blows often hit their mark and cause game-ending injuries. Rules prohibit combatants from killing their opponents. If this occurs, the offending contestant and his family are banished from the village. Referees officiate in stick fighting competitions by verifying knockouts and deciding who will qualify for the next round. The field of contestants gradually narrows down to 2 finalists from an original field as large as 50. When a winner emerges in the championship round, he is carried on a special platform and gets to choose a bride from a group of young women. Festivals. Let's see if we've got something cool in here. Not just a list of holidays. No, that's too bad. Maybe another day we'll read that chapter, right? The spice of life. It would be hard to imagine Ethiopian food without spices. They are an essential ingredient of the country's most popular dish, wat, and give countless other dishes their flavor and heat. Among Ethiopia's most commonly used spices are pepper, garlic, bishop's weed, rue, mint, cloves, cinnamon, turmeric, and nutmeg. Several of these spices are combined with powerful peppers, herbs, and water to form berbere, the favorite hot sauce of Ethiopians. Berbere is a key ingredient in beef and chicken stews, and is used as a dip for raw meat dishes. The exact ingredients used to make berbere form a long list: paprika, red pepper, salt, ginger, onion, garlic, cloves, cinnamon, nutmeg, cardamom, allspice, black pepper, fenugreek, coriander, red wine, water, vegetable oil, cumin, and turmeric. That is a long list of spices. These items are mixed and heated to form a hot, zesty sauce. I'm sure it is. And the last box we have here is about the Ethiopian coffee ceremony. One of the most enjoyable experiences at an Ethiopian restaurant is the traditional coffee ceremony, during which the coffee is taken through its complete cycle of preparation in front of the guest. The event usually starts with a woman bringing out washed coffee beans and roasting them in a roasting pan over a small open fire or coal furnace. The pan is not unlike an old-fashioned popcorn roasting pan. It has a long handle to keep the hand away from the heat, and the woman shakes the pan back and forth so that the beans will not burn. When the coffee beans start to pop, the woman will take the roasted beans and walk around the room, filling the room with the smell of freshly roasted coffee. The roasted coffee is then placed in a mukicha, a heavy wooden bowl, and crushed by a wooden or metal stick known as a zene in a rhythmic up and down fashion, much as how a pestle is used to crush spices in a mortar. Most restaurants today use modern coffee grinders for this process. This is to save time, and the use of mechanical grinders does not take away much from the ceremony. After crushing the roasted coffee beans into powder, it is put into a jabina, a traditional pot made out of clay. Water is added and the brew is boiled over an open fire or coal furnace. Once ready, the coffee aroma fills the room, and the coffee preparation process culminates in the guests sipping the first taste of coffee, served in small Chinese cups called sini. Ethiopians usually stay for at least a second serving of coffee, and sometimes a third. Sounds really fun. Let me make sure that that is indeed the end. Yeah, because then we just have this really yummy looking stew recipe. And yellow split peas with turmeric sauce. Interesting. So that is it for tonight. Thank you so much for watching. If you've made it this far and you're still awake and you liked this kind of content, please consider subscribing, as I read the little boxes out of books all the time. I hope that you found this video relaxing and educational, and I hope that you have a very good night.